Robin, can I have the slides? Thank you. I call this meeting of the Congregation of the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge to order. Thank you for being here. Good morning. My name is Jeff Gauger, and as my nearly last act as your congregational president before my term expires at the end of the month, I'll preside this morning. We have two. Thank you. We have two purposes today. The first is to elect church officers and to elect two new board members to the Board of Trustees, members to the Nominating Committee, and a member to the Healthy Congregation Committee. Our second purpose is to receive an annual report from our senior minister and the ministry team leader, the Reverend Nathan Ryan. Let me use this, my last time at the microphone as president, and yes, I'm stalling so we can count and establish a quorum. Let me say that I think the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge over the past 12 to 18 months has emerged finally from its pandemic coma. I in no way associate that fact with my presidency, but it is a fact. You made it so by attending Sunday services, the auction, and other fundraising events, by attending in droves the installation of our Minister of Congregational Life, by volunteering, by pledging your financial support, by simply being present as we together created and continue to create this beloved community. Church is fun again. Thank you for that. I mean it. And do we have a quorum? We have a quorum. So, as is our custom, I'd like to read and ask for your approval of temporary rules of order for this meeting. I'll read them. In the interest of using your time efficiently, providing for clear and orderly communication, aiding the board secretary in capturing spoken information, and providing an opportunity for members to be heard during discussion, the following procedures shall, with your blessing, be observed to conduct the business of this congregational meeting. The president of the board serves as the chair of the congregational meeting and will recognize members to speak. David Hawley will serve as parliamentarian. David is sitting here. Members making comments are asked to make the comments succinct and to address the chair, who will recognize persons to whom questions are directed for their response. Members will be limited to 2 minutes each time they speak. When addressing the congregation, members shall identify themselves so that they can be identified in the minutes. Please wait for confirmation that your name has been recorded before speaking. No member, other than a board member or someone identified to give a report or to answer a question, speaks a second time if another member is waiting to speak for the first time. If discussion occurs concerning any reports or motions on the agenda, discussion shall be limited to an initial period of 20 minutes. If members have additional comments at the end of that time, successive 10-minute time periods may be proposed for continuing discussion. At any point in time during these periods of discussion, if no further discussion is needed, the chair will note that discussion has ended and call for a vote to end discussion, which, if approved by majority vote, will be followed by a vote on the motion under consideration. In lieu of calling for a motion and a second for voting and discussion, a sufficient amount of time will be waited until it appears discussion is complete. Then a vote will be called. Likewise, the meeting may be adjourned by the president once all business is conducted without a motion to do so. The bylaws require a simple majority approval for motions on the agenda. All active members may vote Proxies are not accepted for this meeting. Voting will be by raised hands, and those votes previously received via email will be included in the count. May I have a motion that congregants agree to observe the special rules of order? Donna Yelverton moved, and a second. Canova? Thank you. All those in favor, would you signify by raising your hands? All those opposed? The motion carries. We'll move now to the election of officers, trustees, and committee members. Bess Corbett, a member of the nominating committee, will present the slate of officers that the nominating committee has put forward for your consideration. It's Bess and sidekick.
All right, got my assistant with me. All right, good morning. I'm Bess Corbett, and I am here on behalf of the nominating committee to present to you the slate of congregants we are putting up for a vote today for the various committees. If I call your name and you are here and would like to come up and say a word, you're welcome to, or you could stand and just kind of wave so that everyone can put a face to the name. So starting off with President, we are nominating Adam Voss. Adam? Hi, Adam. And for Vice President, Heather Yonke. Over here. They've been on the board and have agreed to hold these offices. Okay, I think I'm ready for the next slide. Oh, I do the slide. Oh, Faye does the slide. Oh, excuse me. Thank you. All right. For the election of trustees on the board, this is a 3-year term. So that'd be Ed Benoit. Is Ed here? Oh, I think he's out of town. John Hunt. Oh, I'm sorry. It says John, but it's Joan.
It's my fault.
Okay, my bad. And Henry Tillman. There's Henry. Hi. Now for the nominating committee. This is the committee that comes up with these names, and I really appreciate y'all joining on. You can see we have 4 folks agreeing to start their 3-year terms, starting with Jackie Blaney. It's Jackie. There she is in the back. Hi, Jackie. Jeff, and I'm going to mess up your last name. It's Calmes. Thank you, Jeff. Jeff Gauger, who we were just seeing, and Andreas Hansen. Is Andreas here? Thank you. And finally, the Healthy Congregation Committee, which is another 3-year appointment. Johnny Parker has agreed to move on to that committee. Thank you, Johnny. All right, thanks so much.
Thank you, Bess. Nathan asked me to acknowledge, and I forgot, to folks online that we are streaming this meeting. Welcome virtually. And apologies again to Joan Hunt for my typing wrong on the slide. I move that the congregation accept this slate of officers put forward by the nominating committee. Is there a second? Can you say your last name again, David? Thank you. Any discussion? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor of this slate of officers signify by raising your hands. All those opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. And now Nathan Ryan will present the annual report.
In the future, I should not preach on Sundays where I do this. Here is your 2023-2024 MTL annual report. So a reminder that I am your senior minister, but in my role on the board, I am your ministry team leader. That means that I am in charge of implementing the board's vision. So every year the board gives roughly 3 primary ministry objectives for the staff. Basically, they say, MTL, me, go make these happen. So long as you don't break the budget, you can hire 1,000 people to do it. You could have you do it all yourself. You could have volunteers do all of it. They don't worry about how it happens. They just worry that I do it within the bounds of what is reasonable. So I can't hire hundreds of people because we don't have a budget for that, because one of the things they want is for us to have a budget that's sustainable. Anyway, so this year, their annual vision of ministry are these 3 things. 1, continue our deep commitment to living the values expressed in the 8th principle by examining and acknowledging individual prejudice, by promoting racial reconciliation, and working to dismantle systemic oppression in our institutions. 2, put into action shared ministry by assertively implementing the church's membership plan and by growing the understanding of what it means for ministers, staff, lay leaders, and members to work together. 3, continue to create a culture that develops and fosters involvement, generosity, engagement, joy, and fun. So a little about the annual report process. Every month, I give the board a report on all of the things the church has done, and I put them into one of these 3 annual visions of ministry. To make this annual report, I read through all 10 or 11 of the monthly MTL reports, and I sort of take everything this church has done and put it into one of those 3 categories. Sometimes they fit perfectly, sometimes they don't fit very well at all, but we just pretend. So here is a non-comprehensive list, because it would take hours for me to recap everything this church has done. Under the category of continue our deep commitment to living the values expressed in the 8th principle by examining and acknowledging individual prejudice, by promoting racial reconciliation, and by working to dismantle systemic oppressions in our institutions. So Unitarian Universalists love to think about social justice as an outward activity. Implied in that is this idea that we have it all figured out, and we are coming to help the broken masses out there. This first annual vision of ministry is fundamentally different. It says that all of us are part of this broken system, and we have an obligation to examine ourselves, our committees, and our teams, and this church to figure out the ways that our personal behaviors and our personal prejudices are reinforcing systemic oppression. In other words, we need to be focused on the deep work of figuring ourselves out as a church. This is about us going to spiritual therapy so we do more good in the world, rather than us trying to go do therapy to everyone else in the world. Does that kind of click for part 1? So let me start with the complicated thing we've done and then go to the simpler. Let's just get it out of the way. This church has never been an all-white church. Unitarian Universalism has never been an all-white religion. Even still, it is predominantly white, and the cultural expectations are predominantly white. Many members of this church have spent years through prayer, study, external resources like Dialogue on Race, and internal church work like Beloved Conversations, as an example, figuring out how to undo oppressions in ourselves and build the beloved community. Often when ministers of color, especially a black minister, is brought into the church expects that they will somehow magically diversify the church. This ignores the specific demographics of the city. It ignores the fact that people rarely come and stay for the minister. Instead, they usually stay because of the community. In other words, adding a minister of color to the staff will only effectively diversify the church if the congregation has done the work to understand their role. This church is unique because it is in such a black city. This church is unique because it has a substantial number of black members and of people of color. This church has done an excellent job over the past 2 years of not expecting Reverend Chris to fix all of the stuff in this church. You have allowed both ministers to have our cultural expressions show up to the congregation, and you have been intentional about doing your work to be more welcoming to all people. As some of the skills building this past year, we have done a book study on repentance and repair. That's the UUA's common read. We have been approached by monks at the Blue Lotus Meditation Center, which is a Sri Lankan-based meditation center, and they are now offering meditation once a week, every Wednesday at 5:30. The church collaborated with Youth Oasis to host a rainbow bus tour. A few hundred people from parishes all over the state came to see a bus filled with books that affirmed LGBT people's lives. We had a drag story time during that. We had an open mic. We had 6 protesters. And then last week, when those storms came through and a tree was knocked down in front of Youth Oasis, they reached out and members of this church came and helped them. So we are building a relationship with them that could be sustaining for a long time. For the first time in this church's history, to the best that I know, we hosted the Together Baton Rouge's Delegates Assembly, where we saw 250 delegates from all over the parish attending to do the work of Together Baton Rouge. This month, in early April, we were named as the Second Century Award recipient by Planned Parenthood of the Gulf Coast because of the work this church has done on reproductive justice. We also have a small social justice team report. When Megan and Abel took over social justice, we shifted so that our goal was to make social justice a place that anyone, regardless of skill set around justice work, could come and have an on-ramp into the justice work of this church. That means the ministry is to transform us rather than just go out and fix the city. You don't have in there acknowledging Abel, right? No. Okay, so I would like to acknowledge Abel. When Megan and Abel took over, it was somewhere deep in the pandemic, and I don't remember exactly when. It was between 1 and 4 years. But anyway, Abel is now the organizer for Together Baton Rouge, and everything is good with us and Abel, but it's a weird conflict of interest to be over Together Baton Rouge and also on the social justice team here. So he has stepped down, so I want to take a moment to acknowledge him. Let's... And then because this report is so long, I put little breaks in between. And so Megan is the first break in between my talking.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Megan Sheehan-Dean, and as Nathan said, I've been one of the leaders of the social justice team. And because the social justice team usually meets on the 3rd Sunday of the month, which is today, I said, hey, can I talk a little bit about what we do since we're not having our meeting? So social justice is a value deeply woven into the fabric of Unitarian Universalism and made explicit in our UU principles. As we know, the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge is affectionately known in our city as the church that shows up, reflecting our passionate involvement in equality, justice, and anti-oppression projects in the Baton Rouge area. And as I said, during the 3rd Sunday of the month, we meet in room 7 during middle hour. During this time together, we support one another with our internal work as people of faith to become more inclusive, equitable, and diverse, while our external work is to be accountable to those most affected by injustice. For the time being, we've decided to focus on 4 areas: reproductive justice, voting rights, education, and climate action. And within each of those areas, we are working to build and center community partnerships with those most impacted by these issues. But among all four of these issues and others, we strive to approach them with an intersectional lens centering racial, LGBTQ+, disability, and environmental justice. As I said, the main social justice team meeting is on the third Sunday. The four groups have a rotating schedule of meetings on alternate Sundays. Everyone is welcome to attend any of the meetings or all of the meetings. And if you are interested in receiving the social justice emails, please sign up on, there's some clipboards in the back, and you could sign up on after the congregational meeting to either receive the general email and or specific ones to the four specific areas. And in those emails, you'll know what's going on and if there are quick action items that you can be involved with. All right, thank you.
And a reminder about the structure of the church. So you, the congregation, elect the board. The board says, this is what we want to do. And then they say to me, go make it happen. So social justice is under the ministry side of things, which is what the ministry team leader is in charge of. And so either I could have just done all the social justice myself, or hired a full-time social justice director, which we don't have the money for, or recruited a team of people. And I'm not saying I'm doing all of this is well established long before me, but in the structure, that's the way to look at it. So this is one of the things that you as a church have done to fulfill the board's vision of ministry. Does that make sense? All right, part 2. Put into action shared ministry by assertively implementing the church's membership plan and by growing the understanding of what it means for ministers, staff, lay leaders, and members to work together. This church has a long history of a hub and spoke model of ministry that is pretty common in a pastoral-sized church, but our church is larger than that. What I mean by that is there was one person at the center, usually the senior minister, and everyone else reports to and through them. This annual vision of ministry does two things. The second annual vision of ministry does two things. First, it tries to undo the model to say that we're a broader collaboration of people, that there are teams and sub-teams working in different areas of ministry. And second, it points to some of the work that the board has asked the MTL to do in previous years, mainly to revamp membership. That is a part of Reverend Chris's portfolio when we brought him in. What you should know about this year: it was no longer a year of transitions. Instead, it was a year of reset. I went on sabbatical from May until September. I was back for 2 months, and then our Director of Family Ministry, Kathy Smith, went on a 5-month sabbatical. Both of these sabbaticals were overdue. Ministers and religious educators get a sabbatical every 4 to 7 years. It had been 11 years for me and 7 years for her. So it was time. It is significant for the annual report because my sabbatical allowed me to have a break between me as your pandemic minister, me as your minister who is just trying to make everything stay together, and me as your minister who is overseeing a church full of vibrant volunteers who are doing great ministry all together. One example of this, as a way to fill our pulpit, so we don't have a lot of money in our budget, and we had about enough money for 1.5 preachers for the whole year, like guest preachers. So instead, we offered a preaching class. We've had 2 of them so far. I think about 15 people have gone through that class, and many of them have already delivered sermons for you. There is an extensive addendum to this report. It includes the annual report of the membership team and the final report of the safety teams, which is another about 30 pages that we're not going to read through today. But to synthesize it, first membership, then safety. The membership team's annual report includes these details. The membership team is heavily focused on the idea of preemptive radical hospitality. That means that we as a congregation are welcoming the people before they ever show up. The welcome must be across cultures, across income levels, and across religious expectations. The membership team has created various sub-teams with more than 10 leaders recruited. They have had discussions between the tension between welcoming and othering. They created a table with a whole new system. There's a system for name tags. There's a way for visitors to get a visitor card. There's a mechanism for them to get a visitor welcome email. They've even created a way for there to be snacks provided that isn't just relying on the same people. I believe you just can sign up and bring snacks, right? Yes. Or just bring them. Bring snacks, and then someone will even put a note saying you brought snacks. The membership team has broadened our engagement with Breeze, our database software. We made a switch from an on-staff bookkeeper to a bookkeeping company. For most of the congregation, this will not have a major impact, but for some key leaders, it will. The good news is that we are cleaning up our books, coming up with more efficient systems to make the church run more smoothly. But it also means that all bookkeeping requests go through me or through our congregational administrator, Allison Hall. It is going to take a while for us to learn what it means to have a bookkeeping service rather than a staff person, but just for you to be aware that transition. For example, we are working with a company, and Kim Dwin is the person who is assigned as our bookkeeper. She has another job, so she is not likely to be checking bookkeeper church emails as often as someone on staff would be expected to. We are still in the process of working through this. We think there's a lot of good that will come from this, but you have to know that it's going to take a little while for us to get there. The final part of this second part of the AVOM is the report from our safety team. For a long time, this church has talked about safety, but usually from the perspective of safety for children and youth in Sunday school. In 2019, a safety team was formed. This safety team was tasked at reviewing and proposing ideas to make sure that this congregation, both the building and the people, are safe. They were started under our first interim, and then our second interim, and then our third interim, and then our director of family ministry, and then our congregational administrator, and then me. Those are a lot of different leaders. And it points more to the transition this church has been through than their tendency to, and their tenacity to stick with it, this team. The safety team is not going away per se, but it is reforming in a different structure under me as ministry team leader. Instead of one broad team that looks at the overall safety of the church, the broad safety needs of the church will be overseen by a few specialized sub-teams. I asked the safety team to complete their reports on what they had learned and what still needs to be done. I've also included that report. I mean, it's in the board records in the minutes, so you can see it. I can also provide it for anyone who would like to read the whole report. The safety team has learned quite a few things. That this church has a lot of doors and windows, which is great in terms of theology, and as it points to this church's welcome and openness, but it is bad in terms of knowing who comes in and out and how to recommend safe evacuation, for instance. They learned that our fire alarm system is not connected to the fire station. It's an internal system. They have figured out that the most likely threat facing this congregation's safety is a medical emergency. The next most likely threat is a weather event, which I actually think is so obvious that I don't even feel the need to say it. The highest anxiety risk that congregants express is the risk of an active shooter coming in. From all of the study the safety team has done, that is one of the lowest likelihood events. A much higher likelihood in that realm is a confused or agitated visitor coming in and disrupting church. The team talked with a representative from Homeland Security. They talked with other Unitarian Universalist churches from around the country, and they talked with other churches and synagogues in our city, some of whom do safety similar to us, some do it very differently from us. One of the interims was absolutely shocked that one of the other churches has armed volunteer guards in their building. Some of the things that you should know about the safety in this church. There is an AED system right by the bathrooms. You do not, in the case of an emergency, you do not need to be trained to use it. It tells you what to do. And it would be great if some of us were trained on using it. There are also first aid kits in the kitchen, and I believe somewhere else, if someone can shout where. Okay, they're in the kitchen and somewhere else that is not in this report. There is a plan for an evacuation of the sanctuary, of the whole building in case of a fire, but we have yet practiced that as a congregation, both through logistics and because the Sunday we were planning to do it was the Sunday we shut down. And I am not willing to have another global pandemic happen because we planned a evacuation. But there will be, that is one of the things that is upcoming. Ushers and welcomers have started greeting closer to the parking lot. This acts as a point of engagement both for new folks or confused people about where to go, but it also acts as a point of contact for someone who might be agitated before they come into the sanctuary. There is a plan to offer de-escalation training along with how to best help people suffering from a mental health struggle. The safety team did secure a $35,000 grant to have a keyless entry system, to put in crash doors in more places, and to make it so that some of the doors that would stick and stay open now latch. Because of the transition in bookkeeper and some of the governmental red tape, we are still in the process of getting reimbursed for that. Once we receive that reimbursement, we have been pre-approved for another $144,000 safety grant. You can be happy about that. Are y'all good so far? I'm almost done. There's 5 pages left. No, it's like 16-point font, so it's not like... Some of the undone safety work includes putting crash doors on the sanctuary so that if they were locked and there was a fire, we wouldn't be stuck in here. There's a need to plan and teach and implement CPR. There also needs, this is from the safety team's report. This is not me saying, safety team, these are the things you didn't do. Like they said, these are the things we still need to do. There needs to be a few people who are trained to use the AED. There's also a proposal to have a church safety volunteer every week. They would be responsible for welcoming, but also a point of contact in case of an emergency. That one is still in the early phases of being developed. Most importantly, and the reason for the shift, is that safety only works if the congregation knows about it. In the upcoming months, there will be a series of middle-hour classes, points of education, things like that on church safety. Us having an evacuation plan in the case of a fire is great, but if no one knows about it, then it doesn't do us any good. If 30 members attended a class where we talked about the facility and the safest way to get out, or the best ways to protect ourselves, then the odds that some of the 30 would be in the sanctuary during an emergency is much higher. I look forward to what is coming in terms of this congregation's engagement with safety. I would also like to officially acknowledge the members of this team who have put in hours and hours of tireless work. I'm going to say their names, and then you can clap before you know who they are, but they are Art Scarborough, Ann Irwin, wave if you're here, David Lindenfeld, Melanie Mayu, Gary Parks, Don Hoppy, Stefania Nava, Jerry Stewart. Wave if you're one of those people. Once again, there's a more comprehensive report that I would encourage you to read by emailing me or just reading the minutes of this meeting. The third and final AVOM, and then we're done, I promise. Continue to create a culture that develops and fosters involvement, generosity, engagement, joy, and fun. As I see it, this last AVOM is about us enjoying being together. It makes no sense to have a church if you cannot have the enjoyment of being together in community. Having said that, most of the things I put here may not sound very joyful, but they are, sort of. First of all, we finished an entire Lenten series on death. Where would you put that one? We had more than 60 people engaged in the Death Cafe, where they discussed their own mortality, their wishes after they die. They even discussed how to support the church through legacy giving. Also, in the spirit of not joyful, you should know that twice over the last year, someone has stolen our offering cash. The first time we moved the safe to somewhere more secure. The second time when they found that, we got a more secure safe and put it in a more secure place. Actually, Allison did an entirely very entertaining sting operation, which I will not tell you about in the annual report, but if you really want to know, reach out to her. It's very fun. Other things to make you anxious, but it's okay. You should know that Church Mutual, our church insurance company, is dropping us in about 2 weeks. They have dropped more than 600 churches all over the country because they have switched to a for-profit model. All of Louisiana is going away, so is all of Florida and Texas and some other places that aren't as profitable. Because other colleagues were upset about it, they also just send a letter. They didn't tell you other ways. And so some churches just missed it, and they just went uninsured. But Allison and Heather Yonke worked for months to put into a spreadsheet every single thing we're covered with, and they have 6 bids. And we're going to pick one before this is over. When I brought it up to colleagues, our lowest bid is roughly twice as much as we're currently paying. And colleagues said, lock that down. We're paying 10 times as much. Not in Louisiana either. So I just want you to know that that is happening. This past stewardship drive, we had fewer pledges come in than any time in the last 5 years. But those pledges that came in were substantially higher. We were able to provide, for the second year in a row, we were able to provide a fully self-sustaining budget. That means that everything in the budget is paid for by money in the budget. In the past years, we relied on government loans or money set aside from our capital drive to balance the budget. The only increase we put into the budget was increasing staff salaries, which is the first time we've been able to substantially do that in about 4 years. We had to cut almost all of the programming in half. We had to cut the building budget down. We had to drop our gift to the association, which is normally $40,000, down to $1,000. All of these are, and every other church in the state is struggling to hold on to a minister and a building. We're in a good space, but it's going to take a while before the tree that froze grows back and is able to produce fruit again. Does that make sense metaphorically? All right. To compensate for the lack of pledging, we had to come up with $75,000 of fundraising. This church has never had more than $30,000 of fundraising. We have a generosity team, and they have put together an in-depth plan for fundraising, and you have responded well. You should know that they have 3 goals in their process. 1, that giving is fun. 2, that all church members should have access to these giving events. In other words, no one should be priced out, and all of them should be fun points of engagement regardless of your income or how much money you have to give to the church. And 3, when you come to church, you should not feel like you are always being badgered for money. Those are their 3 goals. We're going to go even a level deeper, and I'm almost done. We have 2 pages left. We have reallocated all of our reserve funds, which I'm sure you're all thrilled to know about, but it's actually really significant. We didn't touch the Memorial Fund, the Disaster Relief Fund, or the Good Neighbor Fund, which is almost depleted. But every other fund we've put into 4 areas: worship and arts, building and technology, faith formation and programming, and justice and outreach. All of the money is now in one of those 4 areas, and we are if we get over the $75,000 of fundraising, any excess will go into one of those 4 areas. And the idea is to have those areas so flush with cash that if we run into a short budget, we can pull from one of those reserve funds to balance the budget, and we can fundraise into those buckets. Does that make sense? All right. I think that's all of the weird super details. Okay. As much as it pains me to say, Unitarian Universalist congregations are struggling in this post-pandemic era. We are doing better than most because of some combination of good luck, hard work, and a long history of health. As such, in October, as a means of supporting these congregations, we held a revival for Unitarian Universalists from all over the state, and we had representatives from every church in the entire state come to our campus. On Stewardship Drive, this is how I wrap up. On Stewardship Drive Sunday, I outlined my vision for what our congregation could be going forward, and I think they are relevant to end here, and they are three things. One, the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge can be a model of support for other Unitarian Universalists in our state and beyond. Two, we are in the unique position to become one of the very few congregations who can become an incubator for Black Unitarian Universalist theology. This is not necessarily about Reverend Chris's theology by itself. It is about how this congregation engages with marginalized theologies and identities, how we allow theologies of Black members to flourish. It is about which thinkers and intellectuals we could attract to our church. As an aside, this is not to say that we are not focusing on theologies of other identities. It is that there are not many opportunities for Black Unitarian Universalist theologies to find expression in our country, and our congregation may be uniquely positioned to offer that. Three, our church can be a voice and a landing spot for surrounding communities who feel stranded by climate change and or oppressive ideologies that are manifesting into legislative realities. The final thing for you to know in this annual report is that we are 2 years away from the 75th anniversary of this church. Did y'all know that? You're supposed to do a capital drive and a strategic plan every 5 to 7 years. We tried to do a strategic plan in 2021, but guess what? We were not ready as a church. So what is coming forward is I am going to put together a small group to discern this, do some discernment work on what it means to have the 75th anniversary of this church. The board has to make this decision, and we've talked about it as a board, so this is not a surprise, but I'm asking the board to think about a strategic plan that syncs up with the 75th anniversary that could also include a capital drive. On a parallel track, Reverend Chris is working with a team on a 3-year plan to make sure that this church is truly building beloved community and undoing any system that would oppress people within or beyond our congregation. We must not limit the transformative experience that is potential to any. We must not limit the transformative experience that is the potential to anyone coming to this church. Please know that your church is strong. Your church is a model for how Unitarian Universalism could look, especially how it can look in the South and how it can look in Louisiana. I am proud to be your minister, and I am proud of the work you have done and we are doing together. That was a lot. I will not do this again for a year. Adam, would you? I yield. Sorry, Mr. President, I yield to the Vice President who is about to be in charge.
Thanks. So we have 3 people that we, installed into the board, and that means we have 3 people who are thanking, who are rotating off our Board of Trustees. If that includes you, could you, come up? We have a small token of appreciation for you. That would be Jerry Becknell and Jackie Blaney, if they're here. So thank you for your service. I've been, yes. I'm privileged to serve with these 2, Jerry Becknell and Jackie Blaney, and you've been here to help this church grow, and I understand you are very good at making things grow.
Thank you. Thank you.
and also our outgoing president, who has served as a example for me as your now elected president of the church. Somebody who I value very much. First of all, I want to present you with this gift. Yes, so this is a person who I value in part because yes, Scrabble. You have these high-value words, right? Thank you. I read these short writings that you do, and you put a lot of value into words, right? And there's a reason for the Scrabble. It's not just any Scrabble game. It's a special edition, the Adam Voss edition, because I know sometimes you're playing Scrabble and you find that you don't have like those letters, those really unique letters that you really want to make those unique high-value words with. So this edition has extra copies of the high-value letters. So your Q's, your X's, your Z's, and a couple of others for your enjoyment. So thank you.
Three more minutes. I ask your forbearance. Thank you. So before we adjourn, I'd like to offer thanks to members of this church, some of your quiet leaders who are wrapping up their terms of service. This is a little bit redundant, but I want to offer my personal thanks. So please join me in thanking Bess Corbett, who will roll off the nominating committee. Bess has done admirable service in just about the hardest period in a church life to serve on a nominating committee, and that's in the wake of a pandemic. Thank you, Bess. Also, two members are retiring from the Healthy Congregation Committee, Shannon Cavell and Kathy Judy. Thanks to them, too. And to the two people you just met, two people I've been privileged to serve with on the Board of Trustees, Jerry and Jackie, thank you. And thank you to all who answered the nominating committee's call to service. We appreciate your work still to come. You've all done or will do admirable service, so much of it unseen and unheralded. Thank you. And now, we are adjourned.